Welcome. We are going to talk about packages for FHIR. I am the architect of simplifier, or lead developer, whatever you want to call it, and I'm co-author of the FHIR Package specification. By the way, if you're still in the Amsterdam this weekend, there's a swing on top of this building. You know, we had the opening drinks here. You can go by boat and go to the top of this building. It's a bit expensive, but there's a swing on top, and you can swing over the edge. So if you're lacking excitement in your life, I've got fear of heights. I did it once. It's still very well deep in my memory. So, okay. I'm going to talk about problems that we have with packages, with profiles, and there's lots of challenges with profiles, and we're not going to discuss those today, most of them, but there are two ones that we hadn't solved them by looking at the model or looking at data types or looking at how clinicians work with data. There's different kinds of problems that you have with profiles, and that they are distributed in a different way. So the two problems that I want to talk to you about today is distribution and versioning of profiles. And there have been a lot of thoughts over the past 7-8 years about profiles in FHIR, and those thoughts have evolved, they have changed. And well, I'm going to tell you where we are now. So let's start with the first problem, and that's the distribution of profiles. Profiles are different kinds of resources, right? So you don't distribute them in the same way. You don't have a doctor entering data in some system and then pushing them to a FHIR server. That's not how you do profiles themselves. So usually what you see is somebody producing a set of files, and each of these files contains one structure definition, one value set, of any other kind of conformance statement, and at some point they have to end up in a system, for example a FHIR server, that can work with those profiles, but it could be anything else. It could be your profile editor or some viewer for profiles, because you know that usually shows a lot of data about the structure. But it's not that easy for the author of those profiles to get those profiles into a server. And it's usually not even the person who can do it, because he doesn't own the server that is eventually going to implement those profiles. So that's the basic problem. Here's an example of me trying to validate some FHIR resources with profiles, with structure definitions on the command line. That's a tool that my company have been writing and using. And as you can see, I was not able to validate this resource because one of the structure definitions that I needed wasn't found. And the reason why that happened is because we built the system to get those profiles in the wrong way. Because if you look at DST1, which was still our mindset somehow then, we thought that a profile had an identifier that was globally unique. In other words, if I would tell you what the canonical URL is, you would be able to find that profile somewhere on the internet. And it would be the one profile that I pointed to. Over time, that process of thought changed in FHIR, and now we say a canonical URL identifies the resource across all contexts of use. As you might note, that's a lot more modest claim. But you know, our systems were initially built upon that principle, and you know, when I talk to people, I still see a lot of people thinking about canonical URLs and profiles in that sense. So our system thought, if we have a canonical, and then we can find the resource that's the structure definition or whatever that is, and we can serve it. So we had a simple table with a unique constraint on canonical. But it didn't work, because if you look 2 pages back, somebody could upload a structure definition to our system with the same canonical, and for us it was no longer unique. So we had to choose, and we could choose wrong. We used all kinds of algorithms over time to see which was the best one, which was the most official one, which one was active, which was draft, which was a test resource. But eventually, we had to choose, and the whole basic principle of we choosing for you as an author, which is the official one, or the consumer, that's just a wrong principle. So over time, in the FHIR community, there emerged new philosophy that canonicals were in fact not unique globally, but had to be unique within a certain context. So the question then becomes again, how do you get those profiles and the right ones with the right canonicals on the server? So this is the problem. Keep that in mind. So we're now going to talk about the next problem, which is versioning. If you look at a normal FHIR resource, you have basically 4 identifying segments to wherever you are in the world. If the FHIR server is publicly available, or at least available to you, there are 4 components to find that resource, and that's the server, the resource type, it has an ID, and if you want to be more specific, if you don't want the latest, you can get a version, and you will be guaranteed to have the right resource, if there's no bug in the server, of course. For profiles, that works differently. So if you want a profile, you're usually not going to say, I want the ID of the profile, because it transcends your context. It can be done in a different context. And so you don't say, this resource conforms to this other resource with that ID. You say, this resource conforms to this profile, this canonical. So we have a canonical reference, that's a URL with a version behind it. And then the structure definition itself, it says, this is my canonical and this is my version. So again, you see the principle of versioning profiles is differently than you do with regular resources. Now, the problem, of course, is that profiles don't live in isolation. Structure definitions refer to each other. And you can see that here, that if you start upgrading the version of structure definitions individually, it has a viral effect. So one resource pointing to another one, if the other one has a new version, then this one needs to have a different version pointing to it, if you want to get that specific. The problem, of course, if you don't add the version, and you just say, this is the canonical, you still have a problem, because which version did you mean? There's also a subtle change, which I will go only very briefly, and that is you usually only want to publish your canonical, your profiles after they're done, right? If you're sure not to make any change anymore, then you publish your profiles. But the problem is the version is in the profile, so you have to make a change after you decided to publish. So, next one. Here's a nice example of an incoherent scope, where you say, I've got one resource pointing to another, but the other one is pointing to a different version of your profile, and therefore you can create circular inconsistencies. Here, I'll take a real-world example, or a real-world-like example with two general practitioner practices and a hospital that are going to exchange data. And imagine the hospital is in the lead. They created the profile, and the two GPs are going to use that profile, or they send resources that conform to that profile. Now, it starts simple. You know, this is the ideal world. This is how we started thinking in FHIR. We just define what the structure looks like, and the other ones just conform to it. But over time, of course, we all know that data formats, data structures, fields, cardinalities, they change. And so then you get a hospital that says, okay, we now have version 2. But of course, the GPs are still on version 1, or they have data conforming to version 1 or 1.1. So the hospital will have to deal with both. And over time, that gets more complex, especially, once again, if those resources point to each other and they all have their own version. See, it can even become incomprehensible once they start interacting with each other. So what you usually see happening is that people version groups of profiles together. and they give them all the same version. And that might be centered around an API or a publication or whatever. And generally, you can see it's a good idea to have an API pointing to one specific version. As Grahame said this week, the interaction as a whole is versioned. So the idea that emerged in FHIR, and probably we were not the first in the world, is to say we shouldn't version the items, we should version the set. And then, of course, with that in mind, as a developer, you quickly come to a new conclusion. Let's put everything in a package. So this is how we got started. An API can be the same as a package. It could say it conforms to every conformance resource in this package. You could say I have a use case, which I can put in a package. We can even say, and we did, we can have a standard put into a package. So we can now say an API is defined by a package, if it has if it has a unique name at least. All right. So I'm now going to tell you how we implemented packages for FHIR, as it stands now. So the first thing is, what do packages solve for FHIR? And that's it reduces maintenance. You don't need to version individual resource. You still can, but you don't need to in most cases. There's no cascading of profile updates, and it will reduce your version hell, which is a term as a developer you will probably know, working with packages and versions and stuff. So there's a lot of things you can automate once you have a package, because packages live with tools. There are tools for packages, and therefore you can distribute and publicate and discover them more easily. It's an easier way of communication, because a package has a unique name and usually a unique version number, but you now have a unique way of saying of a whole set of conformance resources, this is what I'm talking about. In the past, you couldn't do that. You could say, well, you know, I want you to work with profile X 1.3, and I want to work with that other profile 1.6. And, you know, in order to say to someone, this is my scope, you could either give them a file or a bunch of files, but there was no name for it. Of course, we also had the concept of IGs that partially solved that problem. So it turns out that it also increases quality, because you now can clearly say, I point to that canonical from here to here in my package. I have profile A and profile B, and A points to B, and you don't have to version or mention the version anymore, because you know that the canonical within the package scope is unique. There is still a version, or there can be a version, but there's less relevance in most cases to mention it. We chose to use NPM as a base for FHIR packages. That doesn't mean that we will be 100% NPM compliant. We're pretty compliant still in most cases, or in a lot of scenarios, but it's a principle where we started off with. So there's no guarantee that we will stay 100% or even 80% compliant with NPM in the base. But right now you can still use NPM Client to get packages. So a package has a unique name, and in FHIR we decided to follow sort of the canonical URL principle or the namespace principles to separate it by dots, so that we encourage you to clearly state what scopes and subscope you want to describe. So you start with your organization or your country, and then you go into your scope more precisely, so that you know it's more readable, especially for developers who are usually used to that. The only mandatory part, I think, is the dot. It has to contain at least one dot, or at least two. And the rest is sort of how you should do it. You know, we're not going to say you have to put your country first, or you know, there's probably international packages. Then it doesn't make sense. So it's a good practice to follow this as a principle.
So, I think this is working.
Yeah.
So, HL7.FHIR, I own that as product director. So if you think you want to use HL7.FHIR in your package name, you have to talk to me. If you're an affiliate, then you own HL7.FHIR.xx for the affiliate code for HL7. I administer US on behalf of the US affiliate. AU and a few others are administering their own. IHE has its own policy for administering IHE.FHIR.x. If you are making packages, you can come and talk to me about naming strategies, but you can't use, and you'll see some packages FHIR. Which are not HL7 packages, I own that too. Otherwise, you can use your own prefix for whatever you want to do that identifies you.
Yeah, so a good practice would be country shorthand dot organization or something like that. But you know, in principle, you're relatively free. So a package has content.
Just what if you don't associate with any particular region? Do you still recommend putting a region there?
No. You could put int for international or something. Or if it's completely irrelevant, you can leave it out. But
HL7 uses the somewhat obscure code UV for universal.
which might not even be the case for all non-regional packages. So a package has content, and we said you can put anything in a package that you want, just like with NPM you can. But for most of the part, we don't care what you put in, unless it is conformance resources. So we follow the NPM principle of putting all your conformance resources in a packages, I think, package folder. And for the rest, you can have an example folder with example resources. And for the rest, we say, put it out of the package folder, and you can do with it what you want. But don't expect all the tooling to understand what's in there.
Yeah. I distribute JSON schemas in /JSON and XML schemas in /XML and schematron as well, and some miscellaneous files that we haven't managed to extract our dependency from in /other. But that's what I'm doing. So.
Yeah, I can expect that there will be more folders that become sort of standard or a common practice. But for now, put your conformance resources in a JSON file in the package folder.
Is that published, Martijn, somewhere? And what is
Yes.
What is the maturity status of that spec? It's not normative, apparently, but is it approaching?
I will give that one to Grahame.
Okay. So it's not a formal specification. FHIR just took control of the specification from Martijn and I, but it's not on a formal standards track. It's a wiki page that they control the changes for. FHIR, the committee hasn't decided whether it's going to have a formal standards track or not. Typically, when it's a tooling standard for a few of us, a small group of us, we don't think it's worth investing in being a formal standard. So we'll have to see how many people decide they care about this other than just...
It's a growing group, let's talk about it.
Yeah. Well, I'll talk a bit more about where we are now and where we're going in some later slides. So the third part is that NPM packages and therefore FHIR packages follow the simplifier standard, which is very nice, one-page standard that we use in a lot of developer industry, where you say there are 4 parts. There's a major, a minor, a patch, and label. I will not go into them deeper, but you can read up on them on simplifier.org, I think. So it would look something like this. Now, in a package file, in an NPM package, is a package.json that describes the metadata of the package. And in FHIR, we have taken over most of those principles. We leave a lot of fields out, and we say we don't care about those. We only make mandatory the ones that we really need. There's a very recent new field where we say you need to add the FHIR version or FHIR versions, preferably one, but sometimes more. And yeah. The other part, which is very relevant to, I think, most conformance situations, to most IGs, to most use cases is that you build in FHIR upon profiles from others. For starters, the FHIR standard. So you build upon the core profiles, and then there's 1 or 2 layers on top of that. So packages are the perfect solution to that problem, because with packages you also have dependencies where you define which scope you want to include in your situation as sort of your base. For example, you could say, I have 2 general packages that I use in multiple use cases, and I want to share them in a more specific use case, or a more generic use case. You can even say, I have 1 core packages, this could be the FHIR standard, because that's usually above that one, but that can be shared by multiple, and then come together in one again. Yeah, skip this one. We allow a subpart of NPM versioning. NPM is very creative and very expressive in how you can describe the dependencies on which you use, by even saying I can use version 1.1 to 1.7 or 2.0, stuff like that. We're not going to allow that in FHIR because, dependencies in FHIR is already complex enough, and it probably creates more mess than it solves. The only thing that we for now have described as a possible practice is making the patch version a wildcard, where you say, I just want the latest of this major minor version. So you do that with an X. Now, how does that work? A package server has a set of packages, of course, in a repository. Then you will have a package client that can retrieve the packages from the server, and it will allow your projects, whatever that is, to get those packages. But what it does not do is it usually doesn't serve the package itself to your tool. It puts the package in a local cache, and it exposes that cache to your tool. And that way, you can download a package once, and it can be used by multiple tools or multiple instances, multiple projects, etc. So in your tool, you usually have a scope that could be a package itself, or at least a package JSON file, a set of dependencies where you say, these are the dependencies that I use, and if you want data from them, you go to the package cache. Here's a more detailed example with the blue ones being actual packages. So this is the whole set of packages in this theoretical server. This is a subset of that in your cache, and these are the references in your scope to your cache. Yep, skip that one. So the next part, which is new, is where are we now? And we're pretty far, I think. There's some stuff that we have definitely achieved. These are the specifications that Grahame just mentioned. There are 3 in total, but the most important one is the NPM package specification, which is on our wiki. There's 2 other ones. One of them is how you deal with a package cache, so that you can, that different tools can share the same cache. We have a package server on our tooling system that you can use, that follows as good as everything from the standard or from the specification. We're still tweaking some stuff, but you can use it. And we have our own client, which we heavily tested with that server, and that works like a charm now. So we use it ourselves a lot, and we've got several clients that use it. Tornox is, by the way, a free command line tool, so if you want to experiment with it, you can just download it. There are some other tools, and I might not be even complete here. Maybe Grahame can tell some more about the Java and the HL7 part. So we have a command line tool that knows how to deal with packages. We have a package registry, and of course our profile editor works with packages now as well. So if you now start a new project, you can say, my project depends on these and these packages. Grahame, do you have anything to add to tooling-wise?
Yeah, Happy includes a class that wraps all this up, you just say which packages you want and tell it to load them all. It'll do all the fetching and then just feed you the resources out of the packages you asked for. And the validator also depends on the package infrastructure and is supposed to be transparent. It's been a little bit rough in the last few weeks as we got all this stuff lined up, but I think I've got it back to being transparent. And are you going to talk about packages like registry?
Yeah.
FHIR?
Yeah, for sure.
Cool.
Let's see, is that the next one? Yeah, there you go. So there's now a packages.fhir.org. We still have to decide what exactly goes on there or how limited or broad that is, but it currently serves the same packages as packages.simplifier.net. So if you want to use this as a source for trying out, you can definitely try it out. We have on Simplifier, we have visuals for the package server so that you can actually, you can search for packages and you can have some instruction on how to install them. But at least, you can figure out what's out there because there's been quite a few people who've been already making packages. Definitely worth a look. So here's our command line tool that in order for me to get all the latest conformance resources of the FHIR specification of the technical correction of a few weeks ago, I only have to call this command. It's just a one-line instruction now, and I get the complete specification in my local package cache, and I can start working with it, which is, I think, for me at least, was a very significant change to how I had to do it in the past. There are people and organizations that are already using packages. One of our national institutes in the Netherlands is already distributing their packages to their users and customers, even though they realize it's in beta. But people are already trying it out. Yeah, Grahame, do you want to say anything more about where we stand with the Java tooling or for example, the IG generator?
So every implementation guide and every version of the core specification that we've published on hl7.org or FHIR.org has a published package. Those packages are on packages.fhir.org or will be in the next few days. Martijn and I are still nailing that down. And also anything published through the IG publisher generates a package. Are you going to talk about RSS feeds or should I do that now?
Yeah, go ahead.
So if you want to get your packages onto...
Can you stand up, Grahame?
If you want to get your packages onto registry.fhir or packages.fhir.org, we're actually doing that by RSS feed. So there's a registry JSON file that lists all the packages, the package feeds that we will be indexing automatically onto packages.fhir.org. So if you want to register a feed, and we'll be writing up a spec for the feed, and you come and talk to me, and I'll register the feed, or to them, and one of us can register the feed. It's actually in a GitHub JSON file, and then their crawler will crawl those feeds, or you can register. Also, you can register those feeds yourself in Feedly or whatever your RSS reader is, and that's a standard NPM RSS feed format. And then you publish, every time you publish a package, you enter it in your RSS feed, it'll get into packages.fhir.org. Otherwise, you'll have to figure out how to upload it to packages.fhir.org, and I'm not exactly sure how that works yet. And the idea is that all formally released specifications, whether they're HL7s or affiliates or IHE, who also have will have their own feed. I'm working with them on that. Or any other affiliate or national standards organisation or company that wants to publicly release their content will actually register their packages one way or another on packages.fhir.org, and that will also drive the content into registry.fhir.org, although there's work we have to do there yet. And then the Java tooling. Today the Java tooling uses a patchwork-built hack thing for finding packages. Next week I'll replace that and I'll just use packages.fhir.org. I've been waiting for that for a long time.
Allow me one question. Martijn and I have worked on this also quite a bit. Fantastic to see this for distribution. There's also distribution from specification into large-scale deployment in the field, right? And that might need additional caching from, let's say, the worldwide repository, packages.fhir.org, into local caches. So my expectation actually has been that we stay very close to NPM specification to enable the whole distribution chains to use NPM package servers out of the box, right?
Yeah.
Not all have to fall back to the
Yes.
managed infrastructure on that.
Yeah.
So that's a point of consideration.
Yeah, that's definitely something we. So the question is, there will be private initiatives who want to implement FHIR packages as well. So please stay as compliant to NPM as possible. And I think there's a two-part answer to it. So one, yes, we will try to. The other part is we will make tooling available that you can rely on in as far as it doesn't.
And so at the moment, we have some constraints on NPM, like the version constraint, and we have some extra extensions that we added around just FHIR metadata in the packages. But as far as we're aware, they're standard NPM packages.
So far, so good.
Although some NPM package tools appear to assume that we're talking about JavaScript NPM packages,
Yes.
which we are not.
Yeah, so we specifically disallow running of scripts on installing of FHIR packages, just to get that potential minefield out of the way. And you know, I have been testing with NPM Client and it works. So basically,
Today it works.
yeah. But yeah, so there's some stuff, but I'll mention that there's some stuff that we want to add to it to make it more powerful that NPM cannot. And one of the things is, of course, NPM is not even really a standard as far as I know it, so it's a bit hard to be exactly compliant. So the next question is, where do we go from here? There's a few things on that. So one of the things that we believe is very powerful, and we implemented sort of initial version for it, is the way you can find packages. So one of the most important thing you want to do is, I have a canonical, which package does it live in, or which packages does it live in? So we built that for now, and this works. It works on package.fhir.org as well. But this will probably be that this might change very well, because you know this is the next bit where Grahame and I are going to work out what we really want and what we need. Next week. Yeah, so we will write up a specification for that as well. At least that's the plan. We are going to open source our package client library for C#, so that everybody can use it and integrate packages if they want or need to in their own C# tooling or any other .NET tools. We plan to integrate the packages library a little bit further into the already open source C# library set, so that you can, you know, for example, now we serve the specification zip, as we call it, with all the profiles of the current standard with the C# libraries, but you know that's quite a bit, and you might not need it, and it might be the wrong version. So we're going to sort of integrate that and leave out the source conformance files out of the C# library later, and just allow you to get it with a FHIR package. Well, Java is, I think, as far as it is already finished, already open source.
Yeah, it's already open. I have to change it to use the packages server. It's part of Happy. In terms of what comes next, we've been publishing a whole bunch of different zip files and other kinds of packaging of all of the things in the FHIR specification and the implementation guides. I'm deprecating all of those. It's all packages. If you're one of those strange souls who likes XML, we even distribute an XML variant of the package, so that what you get is XML in the package, not JSON. But the normal, you have to nominate the XML version for that. The normal package is the JSON file, but I'm getting rid of everything else. It's all packages from now on. If you, in your products, depend on any of this stuff, use the NPM package distribution system, use the NPM packages, even if you download them manually. If you are a happy user and you're looking at the code, James and I have agreed that there's a couple of entry points, hooks I need to add, so that you can control when the client goes on the network, or do the package resolution manually out of some local, semi-local cache that you manage. I'll add those control points. That's actually coded, half-coded on my laptop, but not committed yet.
Yeah, so very recently we realized that we didn't spend enough time in separating out the packages over the different FHIR versions. So, you know, if you have an R3 package, you probably only want to deal with R3 dependencies. So we are now looking further in how to integrate. So there's a field now in your package JSON that says this is an R3 package. But you know, in search, in resolution, and your tooling, you will probably want to be more explicit. Give me only the R3 package as a scope to search and work with. My personal goal, or you know, how you say, my dream would be to make every package in the package server FHIR endpoint by itself, so that you can fetch individual resource, and then you could basically see the package ID as a REST endpoint. But you know, that's not just an idea so far, but I think it will be very powerful. There's also still an issue with after the technical corrections, we uploaded the R4 packages for this FHIR core specification, but because there's a breaking change in exactly the sort of the most relevant part of snapshot generation, we've not made them publicly available yet. And what we do for now is at least in our tool system, is that we leave out the snapshots, or we allow you to leave out the snapshots of a structure definition, because there's still differences in how tools generate snapshots, and we also see that a lot of tools regenerate the snapshots themselves anyway. But I do think there's a valid use case to say, I want the packages with the snapshots, or I want the packages without the snapshots. So we'll see if we can define some kind of specification with that. So, in terms of adoption, if you work with conformance resources in any way, you should seriously consider the question, should I be using packages, yes or no? And it might very well be that the answer is no, but it's a good question to start with, wherever you work with profiles or other conformance resources. Because you know, packages are meant to make your life simpler. So the kind of tools or systems that can use packages, I've listed briefly here, but you know, you can imagine yourself probably where you can use them. That's it. Any questions? We've got 1 more minute.
Just a thought. You started by saying that we use packages to avoid potential conflicts or inconsistencies, but it does not really, so you can still mess up, right? If you have
Sure.
packages
Give you every opportunity to still mess up if you want.
Yeah, you can package up your inconsistencies. That's really
Yes.
Sorry?
You can package your inconsistencies up and have all of your eggs in one basket.
Mechanism to see how that works, right? There is
Yeah.
no self-validation there.
Well, you know, that's up to the tools, I think.
Do you think that it's reasonable when naming your package to use a convention similar to like what you would in Java, where you would say something like Google FHIR?
Sure. Yeah, I believe I'm a C# guy, so I don't know the details. And in my memory, Java naming systems are always longer than ours. But
I don't use the .com or the .com dot or the org dot. I just assume that you're in control of that. So we don't use org.hl7.fire, it's just hl7.fire. But you do need to do a little bit of due diligence on that.
yeah. So what you will you're free to name your packages the way you want. From our perspective, as you know, a registry provider, we will probably at some point say, okay, guys, you're crossing the limit here. In whatever way, maybe it's too long, maybe it's colliding with some other company, or maybe you're using indecent wording. I don't know. So there'll probably be some limits in the future, but right now we'll leave it to you. We assume that you're responsible people.
If any of you want to publish packages, but you aren't sure about getting name uniqueness, you can come and talk to me about using FHIR. I will issue names within that by request. So you're welcome to come and ask me, and then you go. The HL7 process will ensure your name uniqueness going forwards because we own FHIR. And well, we can't stop anyone else using FHIR, but the package server won't pick it up because the package server, when you register a feed, you register that you own like a namespace, and no one else can own that namespace.
Yeah.
You can publish in that namespace. It's part of our registration process.
What's the idea about the support for packaging server side? I mean, as a FHIR server, I might receive instances of resource that conforms to profiles that has actually the same canonical, but I've been authored inside different versions of the package.
Yeah.
Is there an idea with that?
So your question is, if somebody uploads a resource claiming to conform to a certain profile, how do I know it's the right version? Given that.
I know the version of the package containing the profile the client has claimed conformance to.
Well, it's the server that is the boss of what goes in and out, right? So the server has itself a statement of conformity to a specific version, and that could be maybe there might be even a conformity of how do you say capability statement in the future that says I conform to package X version Y.
So it's the client that should conform
Yeah,
to service.
yeah, because most resources won't even have any claim. They will just send up a resource, and that it might claim or conform to any set of profiles. It's the server that says you're allowed in or not.
So I'll add a bit to that. In HL7, every HL7 published package, the version on the profiles and the value sets and everything, the version's filled out. You'll never see an HL7 published package that doesn't have a fully populated versions. The version will almost always be the same as the package version. There's only a few specific cases where we're republishing external content where we won't fix the version to the same version as the package itself. And so that solves that problem or avoids that problem. If you are publishing a package where Martijn talked about where the package has a version but none of the contents inside the package have a version, then there's no way for the client or any external specification to say which version they're talking about. That it therefore is delegated to the package user to decide how to do that resolution. We had a fairly passionate discussion about this at the last DevDays here in Amsterdam and went round and round in circles and couldn't figure out a better way. But it's something that may get addressed in Release 5, or it may not. If you think that it's an open problem, make a task and push it along on the conformance channel on Zulip.
All right, that's it. Thank you.